Hello, everyone. Good morning. Thanks for joining us today to talk about VMware Cloud Director and NSX Advanced Load Balancer, presented by Aziz, Senior Technical Product Line Manager. Before we start, just a couple of housekeeping things. You are muted upon joining, but should you have any questions for our presenter, please put them into the webinar is being recorded and will be available on demand, as well as a link to the slides that we will email you directly after the presentation. I hope you enjoy our conversation today, and Aziz, go ahead and kick it off.
Sure. Thank you, Crystal, for starting get started. So today I am Senior Technical Product Line Manager with NSX Advanced Load Balancer team. Today we are going to deep dive into VMware Cloud Director and NSX Advanced Load Balancer, also known as AVI. How do customers use our product, and we'll get into the integration details in detail. Before I get started, just a quick disclaimer. We are going to talk about some of the features which might be under development today, currently, and there's no commitment to deliver these features when the product is GA. And some of the timelines and pricing and packaging discussions cannot be determined. So having said that, what's the agenda for today? We'll quickly talk about what are the capabilities and the overview of our NSX Advanced Load Balancer. Then we'll talk about the detail on the integration, what we have with vCD, VMware Cloud Director, and what are the options or the steps for provider, for tenants, what is the roadmap we are having. And I'll do a quick demo for both the provider and the tenants view with vCD in our test environment. So let's get started. So advanced load balancing is critical for any digital transformation and cloud. Today we live in an application economy, and according to the IDC report, as of 2021, there are 195 million apps, and this is going to grow to 750 million apps in 2025. With the modern apps and a lot of application growth, there are needs for ADCs to provide the load balancing and application security for your applications, and these are all provided by Advanced Load Balancer, NSX Advanced Load Balancer. To provide your application experience, it fits into the VMware's fundamental blocks of compute, networking, and storage with your advanced load balancing as a capability as well. So what are the use cases? Where can you use this in the land of providers or the vCD environments? You can use load balancing in private clouds. You can use load balancing in hybrid clouds, or for modern apps, or EUC use cases, or for your web application security. So it's a single suite of application load balancing capabilities provided by our NSX Advanced Load Balancer. You don't have to pick and choose different products for all of the different solutions. You get all. NSX ALB provides you universal solution for all the use cases of load balancing. So let's get started on what does the architecture look like, right? How does NSX Advanced Load Balancer work? So NSX Advanced Load Balancer is broadly kind of categorized into two elements following the pure SDN principles. We have a separate control plane and data plane. The control plane is called as the controller, Advanced Load Balancer controller, which is you can either run it as a customer managed environment, or we have started offering the SaaS solution of it. And the data plane is basically the AVI service engines, right, which becomes the application fabric for providing you the load balancing capacity across either it being on-premise or a public cloud in different form factors. We can the service engines or the control plane can run as a VM form factor or a container or a bare metal, right? And across any cloud, you can have a single dashboard or a control plane to manage all these ecosystems. By providing a centralized orchestration and elasticity, whenever you require more capacity on your data plane, it can scale in and scale out based on your underlying application needs. We have auto scale capabilities which can detect not only the LB capacity but also your backend server capacity, and we can do the elastic scale in and scale out which is required. Also, the control plane and data plane have a robust resiliency between them. Any failures in the data path are detected by the control plane, and immediately the required capacity is provisioned by the controller. For example, let's suppose a service engine goes down, automatically based on the high availability settings, a new service engine will be provisioned without any manual intervention. In the legacy kind of world, you would have to kind of raise a ticket, understand why the failure happened, and then provision, which might take hours or days, right, to detect and kind of remediate the issues. Whereas in modern load balancers, all these things happen automatically. And the best part of it, all of AVI or NSX Advanced Load Balancer follows API first architecture. So all of this can be automated through either Ansible, Terraform, or we also have SDKs for across Python, Java, and Golang. So customers can integrate either through Swagger APIs or any of these SDK integrations, or the Ansible Terraform solutions to kind of manage and provision the load balancing capacities. On top of it, the control plane fetches all the real-time metrics from the data plane, the traffic which is getting load balanced, and provides a very high, rich UI and observability with respect to analytics and what's happening with the applications in real time, right? We also started providing a service called Pulse. This is a cloud service which you can register your controllers, AVI controllers or NSX Advanced Load Balancer controllers to. The cloud services is going to provide live thread updates. For example, let's suppose you have WAF signatures or the IP reputation database, and any other digital app security signatures can be directly synced from our cloud services onto your respective controllers. And also, starting from December, we have also provided a centralized licensing option. So you can check in and check out your licenses across your controllers through using Pulse service. And also we have started a tech preview for automated support, proactive case support creation, meaning any of the services which are failing in your NSX ALB ecosystem, automatically a ticket will be created, the tech support will be bundled and uploaded to your SR service request, and an engineer or a GSS engineer from VMware will be assigned to the ticket without any intervention from the customer. So this will provide a lot more agility and simplicity for deploying NSX Advanced Load Balancer. So having said that, just to kind of show how we are enabling the cloud operation model for load balancing compared to the legacy load balancers, which are the F5, Citrix, or A10s in the market. We have built-in cloud operation models with respect to automation. We have self-service automation, as I mentioned, the proactive tech support, elastic auto scale, and we are purely software defined, right? Meaning the control plane and data plane are separated. So any failure in the respective, let's suppose you're upgrading your control plane, it will not impact your data plane. And if there are any failures in the data plane, automatically the control plane will provision the respective capacity which is required. And the utilization, because of these things, we can make concise utilization, optimized utilization, which can be made as with respect to capacity, especially for the providers who are hosting the infrastructure and can kind of get the maximum to their capacity what they need to drive the revenue. And with respect to troubleshooting, we provide the rich analytics, as I mentioned, in our native in the controllers UI, and we also export close to 550 plus metrics which can be used or integrated with your SIEM solutions, maybe Splunk or Prometheus, and then you can have your alerting and ticketing systems if required as well. We also provide is a very strong and validated integration solutions across VMware stacks. As today we are talking about vCD, we have a very strong integration with NSX as well. Whereas a lot of competitors lack all these capabilities, you have to do a lot of automation out of the band, whereas NSX Advanced Load Balancer provides you all this natively. Right? So let's get started with the vCD integration on side of the things. So starting AVI or NSX Advanced Load Balancer was available starting with 10.2 of vCD, and what it meant was underlying vCenter 6.7 or 7.0 and NSX 3.x, and AVI had a matching version which was 20.1.1 at that point. And one thing we have changed recently is that prior to 10.4, which is 10.3 and lower versions, earlier you had to run different controllers for different licensing. We had a different licensing model of AVI Basic and AVI Enterprise. We have got rid of that, and starting with 10.4, you are going to see Advanced Load Balancer Standard and Premium, which can be consumed within vCD. So the same controller can be used for both standard and premium features of load balancing, right? So it's a very simple adoption starting from 10.4 onwards. So what can provider do and what can tenant do? We'll quickly walk through this. So the providers can onboard NSX Advanced Load Balancer to provide load balancing as service, and expose the load balancing as service, which is the service engine groups. You can kind of create the service engines into groups and either run it in dedicated mode or shared mode. I'll talk to about this point a little bit in detail. Then the provider can set quota and limits on the LBAS capacity per tenant. It can set that this particular tenant can create 10 virtual services or these many service engines. All those quota capacities can be set by the provider. Then kind of monetize the LBAS service by billing the tenants based on their usage. And the provider also has to kind of manage the life cycle with respect to upgrading the NSX ALB, creating some of the infrastructure related elements, which I'll show it as part of our demo, the certificate management, and the tenant side, the tenants can self-consume the load balancing services either in standard mode or a premium mode. If you refer to the product guide, vCD and vCPP product guide, you'll get more details on what are the charges and what are the features. So basically, in standard, we provide all layer 4, layer 7, SSL, IPv4, IPv6 load balancing capacity. In the premium, all that encompasses standard is provided along with metrics and analytics with elastic HA mode. What it means is that in standard, you can only use active standby HA mode, and there are a few additional load balancing algorithms and persistence operations which we provide in premium load balancing services. I'm going to show those as part of the demo as well. What is upcoming? We are trying to come up with automated billing integrated with usage meter. Currently, it is a manual script which needs to be run by the provider to do the usage reporting. And we are going to add a lot more functionality with respect to custom monitors, HTTP policies, and WAF as a capability which is going to come in the second half of this year. We are also going to work on quite a bit of multi-tenancies as well. So currently, the additional features what NSX ALB provides with respect to WAF, GSLB, if a provider wants to kind of enable that for a tenant, they can do it directly from NSX ALB UI. Tenants won't be able to use the NSX ALB UI directly. Only the provider has the access. I'll show that as well as part of the demo. So I'll take a quick short stop here. There are 5 outstanding questions. We'll try to see if there are any questions here. Um, will we share the slides? Yes. I think this is getting recorded, and we are going to share the slides as well as recording when it ends. There are a few more other questions. I think those I'll cover towards the end. We'll talk about those questions. So let's get started. Right. So how does this integration work? Right. So the VMware Cloud Director is kind of an orchestrator on top of AVI controller, which or NSX Advanced Load Balancer, which talks to the NSX manager as well as the vCenter to do the load balancing provisions. Right. So all the load balancing is provided by the NSX Advanced Load Balancer, and controllers are deployed and managed by the provider. And the integration, as I was mentioning, happens through the NSX manager. All those underlying provisioning with respect to the IP pools or the DSCP management and the provisioning of the service engines are all kind of controlled by the vCD or kind of initiated from the VMware Cloud Director, right? So underlying architecture is basically the NSXT backed network infrastructure, which is kind of getting load balance or provided by NSX Advanced Load Balancer. So let's take a case where we have two orgs, Alpha and Bravo, in the VMware Cloud Director context, where they have their own workloads. Here you can see Alpha has a pool of applications, right? Whereas Bravo has maybe two set of pools for applications or workloads. So what we are depicting here is that Alpha and Bravo can share a service engine group, right? Which is the data path of the NSX Advanced Load Balancer, or the Bravo org or tenant has a dedicated service engine group B, which is not shared by the Alpha org, right? So you can deploy the service engine either in dedicated mode or shared mode. That is what we are trying to depict here. So the service engine group A is going to provide load balancing for the pool members in Alpha as well as in Bravo, whereas service engine group is going to provide load balancing only for Bravo, right, which is dedicated for Bravo. And this is the logical view. All of your service engines and the AVI controller is going to be in the management context. They are not going to be part of the providers or the tenants context. And if you see the logical networking, basically these service engines or the data path entities are going to have a NIC in the respective networks. So for example, in Alpha, where there is an edge gateway, which is the tier 1, and there is a network 10.67.10.0/24 and a 20.24, where you have your workloads of the pool servers. Those are kind of getting serviced through a service network 192.168.255.0/25. And whereas for Bravo, another segment is kind of load balancing that capacity for the workloads in that respective edge gateway. So you can have the same network across two different tenants because they are different VRFs or different tier 1s. There is no overlap. They are different VRFs, and the service engine or the data path of NSX Advanced Load Balancer can detect that and provide the load balancing for them independently. And this is a kind of physical view where basically you have a tier 0, you have where there's a management tier 1 set, and where is the workload or data path tier 1 is connected to on NSX. Just to summarize, basically what does provider do? Provider on day 0 deploys the AVI controllers, creates the cloud configuration and the service engine groups which are required to the HA settings, like you want active standby, or you want a dedicated SE group, or you want a shared SE group. How many cores should that service engine group have? The sizing related things, all those things happen on day 0, and the provider sets that up, right? As part of the cloud configuration and service engine group configuration. Once this is set up, on the VCD, the provider connects the ABI controller and imports these clouds and service engine groups which are created on NSX ALB onto VCD. And once these are imported on the VCD portal, the tenants will be able to consume the load balancing capacity from Cloud Director portal directly. Right, and they will be able to start creating virtual services, configuring them, the day one and day two operations of managing them, and automatically based on the creation of the virtual service which is required, underlying the NSX ALB controller will provision the service engines, the data part entities based on the configurations which the provider has set it up, and set up the DFW policies and all those things automated way, in an automated way. So this is in a nutshell kind of one pager of how the integration works with respect to provider, with respect to tenant, and what happens under the hood, right? So what is going to, this is a little bit of roadmap, what we are working on. We are trying to work on getting WAF as a premium feature in VCD for customers to kind of consume the WAF capabilities of load balancing. We're also adding the traffic logs onto the UI of VCD portal, and capabilities for HTTP policies as well in the VCD portal. So let's get started with the demo. I'll take a quick pause here again to see if there are any questions so far. Okay, there are quite a few questions. Let's go one by one in them and then get started with the demo. So Damien has asked, VCD needs NSXT and AVI. Yes, starting with 10.4, you require the underlying everything is NSX T and AVI. So it is transparent to the users. The provider sets these things up for you. Hope that answered your question. And there is another question from Monir Raji. What are the hard limits about integration ALB and VCD, number of tier ones per SE group in a shared mode? So currently in a cloud, you have a limit of 128 tier ones on an end, but overall on an AVI controller cluster level, it is 300 tier ones. But we are working on kind of increasing these numbers every release. So starting with the next upcoming release of AVI 31.1, you would see that number going to around 500, and we plan to go towards 1,500 by end of this year, the number of tier ones per AVI controller cluster. Are there any negatives of having shared service engine group? Mon Smith is asking question. No, it depends on how your requirements are there. So effectively, when you are sharing a service engine group, it's the same VM, but they are respective. The two tenants are respectively in different VRFs. So the data path is different. Basically, the NIC, which kind of handles the traffic, will be a dedicated NIC and a separate NIC. But if you have restriction or have some policy as a provider or a tenant that you need a dedicated VM or a separate VM, then you can use a dedicated service engine group setting. Hope that answers the question. Do you have a guide for sizing? Yes, we have a sizing guide with our account team should be able to help you, Vivek. So get in touch with our account teams. We have a DICE tool internally, which helps our internal reps to kind of do the sizing of the virtual services as well as your whole of the capacity which is required. Can you explain the traffic path, flow path? Yes, I'll try to do that as well. Once we do the demo, I'll explain the traffic path as well. Which version is going to provide the logs? This is going, Monir Raji, this is going to come mostly in 10.5.1 around August, September timelines of 10 VCD. I would like to see L7 being configured via tenant perspective. Yes, Henrique, I'm going to show that as part of demo. Today licensing metric is core of SE for premium feature set. Do you have any licensing per VS feature set reason for customers premium? Very good question, Vivek. Yes, the licensing today is as per the course, the service engine course which are get consumed. We do plan to kind of provide this licensing or usage based on number of VSS or the throughput and traffic parts. It is as part of our roadmap, but for not this year, it will mostly come next year. These are the building blocks for our SaaS offerings as well. So VCD also has a CDS SaaS offering. We are trying to work. Currently, we are in the design phase on working out how exactly we can kind of make those things happen. So going forward, you should see that happening, Vivek. Yep, yeah, Vivek, it is 660 points per core licensing model. Yes, you're right. And Andre, will cluster creation will be automated from one controller to 3 host controller cluster? At the moment, cluster could be done only manually. Yeah, yes, Andre, but you can use Ansible or Terraform to kind of do that provisioning as a provider. You don't have to manually deploy it. Also, we are adding some parts of LCM of the AVI controller through NSX. You should be there is a lot of automation which we provide to do that. You don't have to do it manually. So there was a follow-up question by Monir Raji that 300 tier ones on one service engine group or all in AVI controller. Yeah, so 300 tier ones is on all as a total on a AVI controller cluster, and per cloud it is 128, but we are changing it, matching it to the controller cluster limit of 300 in 31.1 release, which is going to happen maybe May or June this year. So that will be kind of percolated as a VCD capability as well. It is a kind of change which is going to happen in AVI side, which will kind of get percolated. Yes, per SE group, you can do the same thing. So service engine group is just a setting. The limitation is actually at the cloud level. I think when I showed you the demo, you should be able to kind of get that. Okay, good questions. Thanks. Any other questions? Please feel free to drop in. We'll go to the demo and then come back. I think some of the things what was asked will get clarified here. So I hope you guys are able to see my the browser where I have the VCD environment in a provider context here. And if you see under the infrastructure resources, generally you will onboard your vCenter, you will onboard your NSX manager. Similarly, now we have, as I was mentioning, this starting from 10.2, you have the NSX ALB controllers which you can onboard. So prior to onboarding this controller here, what does the provider do is install NSX load balancer. And the point which I was saying that you can provision this AVI controller. It's a OVA through vCenter, right? Or you can kind of provision it using NSX as well. So we had added this capability in 3.2 NSX, which is also as part of VCD now. Let me quickly show you that. But currently in my lab, I have not deployed it through NSX. There is a NSX LCM for as well. So if you go to appliances, you can see that there is a option for NSX Advanced Load Balancer. So you can provision or manage the life cycle from here as well, if you want to do via NSX, right? Or you can use Ansible or Terraform automation to kind of deploy on the vCenter or vSphere directly. And once you have deployed or set up the AVI controller, you would come. This is what I was mentioning. You will configure the NSXT cloud. So here is where you can see the different clouds which we support. But in VCD context, we support only NSXT cloud. So underlying, we expect that there is an NSX manager running. So how does the configuration look like? So just to kind of quickly give you an overview, this is my vCenter where I have my different clusters which are kind of registered on the cloud VCD, and I have created different VDCs, right? This is the setting which I have to do on the cloud configuration I have to do on the NSX ALB. I have to provide a name. The type is going to be NSX Cloud. This is the manager credentials, basically the IP or FQDN of manager, and the credentials what we need to connect to the NSX manager. And this is the management transport zone. Here you are seeing the UUIDs, but basically it will be the names which we fetch from the NSX manager, the transport zones which are available there. The management network is required for the service engines and the controller to talk to each other, the NSX ALB controller and service engines. Data networks are the ones basically where you have your the data connectivity. This is what I was saying, that each tenant or respective tier 1, you can kind of pick and say that, oh, this is my tier 1 and this is my segment which I require the load balancing capacity to happen on. So for example, I pick this. If there is a segment here, you can pick that. I have already configured here just to in the UI currently, I think there is a bug. It is showing the UUIDs, but these are the dummy segments which I have created for the demo purposes, right? And if you have multiple vCenters being managed from by the NSX, you can add those multiple vCenters here. And we can also provide IPAM or DNS services as well. So if you want, you can configure as part of the cloud configuration. Once the cloud configuration is done, you would come to your service engine group settings. This is what I was mentioning. So you need to switch to the cloud, which we created. So here I have created a dedicated premium service engine group, just to kind of show you here, right? What it means is that it's a quick setting here. What is the HA mode? I'm using N+M HA mode here, or you can use active standby or active. And you can kind of here, because it is a premium, I'm using 4 GB and 2 core service engine, a dedicated premium SE group. I have one more dedicated premium SE group for preserve client IP use case, where I might need more capacities. So I have given here 4 core and 8 GB RAM for my data path service engine VM, right? So these are the settings which the provider has to kind of configure on the controllers, AVI controller side. Once these are done, on the vCD provider context, under the infrastructure, you can register the controller, right? So I have already registered this controller just for in the interest of time. Just to give you the view, it's just the name and the IP or FQDN of the controller and the username password. So that's a simple thing. Once it is connected, it will show the entry here. It will also have the URL here. So this URL is only accessible by the provider. This is what I was meaning or explaining, that the provider can access the AVI UI but not the tenants. And once our controller is available, all you have to do is import the clouds. So I'm just going ahead and showing that what provider does, right? So they have to just pick the controller, and then the cloud which are available. This is the NSX cloud which is available. I'll pick that up. I'll need to put the name there. So I'll put as demo cloud. Yep. It will just take a couple of seconds for the cloud to kind of the vCD will fetch all the information of the cloud details, which NSX manager and all those things, and it will also populate it or get the details of what service engine groups are there. So we need, now the provider has to select which service engine group the provider wants to kind of provide to their tenants, and what is the reservation model. This is where you need to select, is it a dedicated or shared service engine group mode. So let me pick dedicated, and I'll call it as dedicated SE group. Right. And I'll pick the dedicated premium SE group here, which is it will show all the HA modes as well, which have been set it up. So once this is set up by the provider, let's go into the tenant view. So I have a tenant here, which is SFT test org, if you can see here. So once I come to the edge gateways, so the load balancing is a setting on edge gateway. you will see all your edge gateways. So let's suppose I pick this one, the tier 1 edge gateway, right? So these will be the settings. So load balancing is a setting under this. Right now, if you see, it is inactive. So I'll go ahead as a tenant. I am, now that the onboarding of the NSX ALB and the service engine group settings have been done, I'll come to the tenant and I'm enabling the load balancing service, LBAS, and I can choose I want to kind of consume as standard or premium, right? So I'll use premium setting so that I can show you all the additional capabilities which are there in the premium. And do I want to use transparent mode? This is for the preserve client IP. This works only with active standby SE group. Right now I'll skip this option. I'll just do save. Now on the tenant context, basically the load balancing service is kind of getting provisioned, right, for this edge gateway under the hood, and it will just take a 10 to 20 seconds for it to kind of the underlying network which I was saying, which will get provisioned, the IP settings which are required. And then if you come to service engine group, this is the service engine group which the provider has kind of onboarded or provided. So that shows up here. And this is the quota, default quota, which I am using. The 100 service engine group was 100 VS was the setting which the provider had set it up. And the tenant can set it their own if are allowed, if they want to set their own quotas also. So let me save this first. So as a tenant, now I am all set. I have decided that I am going to use this particular service engine group, which is a premium service engine group, right? And currently this group doesn't support preserve client IP use case. And right now I have 0 virtual services deployed on my the quota, which I have 100, right? So let's the tenant can go ahead and create the virtual services under this tab. But before that, let's create a pool, because there's a prerequisite to create the pool servers. So, and I'll walk you through on what are the options we show in the pool creation, right? So, yeah. So once you click add, you will see what is the pool name. I'll just give it as test pool. For the typo. And my servers default are listening on port 80, so I'll put that. And this is what I was mentioning, the load balancing algorithms. In premium, you get all these options, whereas in standard, you will see the first 3 only: least connections, round robin, and fast response. You will not see all these options. So I'll put the default least connections here. I can set the persistence also. In standard, you will see only client IP as the option. In premium, you see all the other options. You can also set up a health monitor. I'll use a HTTP health monitor, or you can use a TCP, UDP, or ping. I'm just using a HTTP health monitor here. And then my membership, I can either use a group membership of NSX or an IP address. I'll just use the IP address of my server 1.1.1.1. If you have a custom port, you can say it is listening on custom port as well, 8080. Yeah. So I'm all set from my pool server configurations. And once this are set, I'll come back to my virtual service and I can create my virtual service, which is required to be created. I'll do demo VS. Okay. And the service engine group, because I have only one service engine group right now, I'll pick that, the dedicated service engine group. And the load balancing pool, the current pool, what we created, the test pool with one server in it, I'm just picking that up. And here I can choose what my VIP service type can be. It can be HTTP, HTTPS, ELF, layer 4, TCP, UDP, or layer 4 TLS, right? I'm using, for this demo purposes, a simple HTTP service with port 80, and I can add multiple ports on the front, the VIP side. It's both listening on port 80 and 8080. but on the backend side, it can send, because we had enabled only 8080, it will send all the traffic to that. And my VIP IP is going to be 10.10.10 IP, which I have provisioned. This is you can set up the static IP here, 10.10.10, or you can use the IPv6 address, which is if you want. So I'll just quickly save it. So once this tenant does this, what happens under the hood is basically this configuration goes to the NSX ALB controller, right? Right now the status shows normal. That means the config was successful, but the health is pending. It is pending because if we come to NSX Advanced Load Balancer and see what is happening on the application tab, you can see that the virtual service configuration got created here, right? And this is the virtual service which we created. If you remember, let's see the settings here. See, this is the VIP IP address which I picked, 10.10.10.10, and I wanted this virtual service to listen on ports 80 and 8080. But right now it is in creating status because we need a service engine to be created, which is the data path element that is getting provisioned under the hood. And if you see here, waiting for service engine SE, HK, HMM, KM being created. And if you come to vCenter, you can see that this VM is getting provisioned, right? So if you see here, there is a VM getting created, 19% of it. And if you come to the SE folder, you can see this VM getting created. Once this takes around 3 to 4 minutes for the VM to get created and plug all the networks which are required, which from our settings what we had provided. And once that is available, the VIP or the virtual service will be available in the cloud director to be kind of managed, right? So if any settings to be changed, IP to be changed, and all those things can be edited from here. We have some additional settings in premium. You can see analytics as well in vCD portal itself. So if you click on analytics, all the end-to-end timing or the throughput, open connections and response codes, you can kind of get a graphical view of all of this in vCD portal itself. These are all there in AVI as well. This is what the similar UI which is kind of getting replicated in the vCD portal. What I was trying to show. So why I was showing this is the analytics. This part is not there available in standard. It's only available in premium. Also, we have once this VS is created, you can configure policies. These are coming as part of 10.4.2, right? Which I was mentioning, this HTTP policies and the logs. I think the question was when is the logs coming? I mentioned 10.5.1. So all those things will be available in here, right, on the virtual service tab. I hope now it is very clear for the questions which were asked. You can edit again to kind of change any settings. It will get reflected on AVI effectively. So the tenant will not have access to AVI UI. Only the provider has the access to AVI UI. That is what I wanted to kind of set across. That concludes my demo. So let's come back to the questions, and hopefully I have this might have clarified or created more. Okay, Vivek, today SC get connected to the edge gateway. If I have a cost on tier 1 quality of service, example 300 Mbps, so I think by default I'll be limited to put of virtual service respective of SC engine capacity. Yes, so because underlying is the NSX tier 1s or tier 0 provider gateways or the edge gateways, right? If you have any settings on that will become a limitation. So those you have to kind of make sure you have set them up correctly and change accordingly. If I have a requirement to move a customer from standard to premium set, can we do it? What about reverse from premium to standard? Yes, you can kind of change the service engine group settings, but I'm not sure if you can do a live change. But the virtual service, you can change the virtual service SE group on the fly, right? Which I was mentioning here. You can create those service engine groups. service engine group in itself, you cannot change it being premium or standard, I think, but once you have a VS, you can change the service engine group. I think vCD is blocking it, but at least in AVI, you can kind of directly change. Let me show that here. If you're familiar with AVI UI, you can go to the advanced. This is where you can change the service engine group to other service engine groups if required, right? But I think on the vCD side, once you assign it, it doesn't allow you to change. So I'll take a note of that, Vivek. We'll try to see if we can enhance that feature going forward, if we can do that. In the config max, I could not find max SE per NSXT cloud. Do we have this number? The number of service engines maximum per, it's not per cloud, it's a per AVI controller metric, Vivek, and we support 400 service engines per AVI controller cluster today. And we work with our account team. We can kind of help you on any of the limits or details which are not published or not available today. I think it is not a it is also available in config max. It's just that not under the category of NSXT cloud is what I wanted to clarify with. Is premium the same as enterprise in AVI licensing term, but the new name for it, and this feature filter is only via vCD premium standard? So that's a very good question, James. As I mentioned, starting from 10.4 onwards, AVI controller will run always in enterprise license mode, right? You don't have to worry about basic and enterprise anymore. On the vCD portal front, you can decide it to be a standard or premium. So the billing will happen only when you use premium, even though underlying NSX is running on enterprise mode, right? So we have decoupled the vCD standard and premium from the earlier basic and enterprise what AVI or NSX ALB had. So starting from 10.4, if you're using a prior version 10.3 or 10.2, yes, you will have to kind of provision the AVI controller with either basic or enterprise. And there was one more question, that can we have mix of basic and enterprise? No, AVI controller or NSX advanced load balancer can run only in either basic or enterprise mode. To kind of get rid of this limitation, we moved those settings of standard or premium consumption of the service engine group in vCD portal itself, so that you can run advanced load balancer or AVI controller or in enterprise always. Right? Hope that answers the question, James. Gaurav, can you please show the network topology in NSX Manager? Yeah, very good. I think I missed that. I wanted to show that. I'll quickly let you show. If I come back to networking, I'll show the topology now, because the VM is getting provisioned. So this is a network view. So if you see here, my service engine got provisioned here. This is where if I click on the name, you can see that. Right. So this is that SE, if you remember the name HMM, right? That's the service engine VM, and this is the segment where this VM is getting created. And I think it's not totally up yet. Once it is up, it will get attached to the segment where the data NIC or the workloads are there as well. Right? This is the tier 1, and this is the tier 0. This is the edge gateway, and this is the provider gateway on NSX side. Sorry, I missed this earlier as part of demo. I wanted to show this. I got missed. Thanks for reminding that, Gaurav. Hi, do you have any roadmap about all features of AVI supported from vCD? Steven asked this question. Yes, as I mentioned, WAF we are going to add. We also have planned to add GSLB and other settings, but right now for this year we are focusing on WAF. It's a pretty big feature set, so we are planning to add WAF in vCD portal. Monir, can you forward VS pool logs to syslog? Yes, we do have those analytics profile on the AVI side. So for example, this virtual service, I'm using a default analytics profile. Let me quickly show you that. So this provider can set it up initially, right? What analytics profiles they want and all, but from vCD portal, I think we are not exposing that. So let me quickly show you here. So if you see, I'm using system default analytics profile, and these are the settings. Should we send all logs or not? What should be the throttle limit for those logs? And if I show you this profile settings on the AVI side, here you can set up which syslog server you want to export to. We have integration with Log Insights, we have integration with Splunk and many other things. So where is my external logging? Yeah. So if you check this external logging, you can provide the IP address and all those things to kind of export to multiple syslog servers, not just one. You can send to multiple of them, and this you can set those how many max per second you want to send. What are the ports? We provide different protocols, UDP, TCP, syslog over TCP, all those things we support. So this is there as a setting in NSX directly. The provider can set these things up. Some of these things capabilities are not exposed in vCD to kind of change. So right now, vCD is using the system default setting, right? So the default is like no external logging. That's the thing. But the provider can override these settings to kind of set that up. Hope that answers your question, Monir. I think it's linked to Avi Custer's side. I have raised a question to our TAM, Vivek. Okay, sure. You can either send an email to me or the TAM or the account teams. We'll work and get back to you. On which network is the VIP created, and does the traffic flow? Yes, I think the traffic flow question was there. Let me show one other slide deck to kind of explain the traffic flow. Just give me a minute. I hope we still have time. So we had done these other sessions how NSX integration works previously. So, but I'll quickly show in this as well. I hope, yeah. So if you see here, basically in a kind of NSX integration, when we do it underlying, because it is NSX integration, you can have a dedicated tier one for VIPs or and for management, or you can have the same. Our recommendation to have different management tier one and different tier one for the VIPs. So your VIP gets created on the segment. The IP doesn't have to come from the same segment. It can be any IP, because so this is the configuration thing settings. I'll go to the packet flow. I think there was one other question on the packet flow, so I'll go to that. Yeah. So when the VIP or VS gets created, right, it gets created as a static route on the tier one. Okay. So and the next hop will be service engines data NIC IP. So you, as part of cloud configuration, this is what you are going to provide us, that this is the tier one and this is the segment where you want the VIP to be created. And this VIP need not be from this segment. That is what I want to, it can be from the same segment. Let's put this segment is 10, 10, 10, 20, 0/24. The VIP can be any IP because it's just a static route, right? All that you have to, and then there are settings at tier one to redistribute VIP routes, and on tier 0 to advertise those VIP routes if required for your north-south traffic as well. So you can do this simple configuration or settings on the NSX side, and automatically when the VIP gets created as a route on the tier one, user doesn't have to do anything. All the user has to do is create a VS in AVI, and AVI controller talks to NSX manager and creates this route on the tier one. And if there's an external client, basically the traffic, because the VIP route was advertised from tier 1 to tier 0, and tier 0 was advertising via the BGP as a redistribution of routes, the peering router, the uplink BGP router or external router will be able to learn there is a VIP via the tier 0, and the client will be able to reach the tier 1, and tier 1 will do the hash ECMP hash and pick one of the SEs, and the SEs will basically load balance to the respective pool servers and send the response back. And if you do a scale out, automatically that the next hop will be created as a on the static route on the tier 1, right? And the flows will be kind of ECMP hashed across these two service engines, right, which are scaled out service engines. And if it is a internal or meaning within the NSX kind of a client, if the client is connected to the same tier 1 and another segment, basically it doesn't have to go to tier 0. And the most important part is, because this is a static route, it is a DR component, not a SR component, your load on the edge nodes and all those things will be lesser. So there was that question that if I have a rate limit on the tier 1, those will be generally SR component. If there is a north-south traffic, that will be impacted, but for your east-west kind of traffic, it won't have an impact because it is a DR component, right? And if there is a client which is in another tier 1, it goes via tier 0 and then comes to the tier 1, right? So this is the traffic flow, which I think somebody wanted to understand. So hopefully this covers the topic as well. So I think we are 4 more minutes to go. Let me see if we have any other questions, which new questions came up. L7 configuration, I think I showed, right? That was the demo. We created a L7 VS. So this was a layer 7 HTTP VS, right? So this is the VS what we created. Is there any question here or a follow-up question here? If I didn't understand, please can you ask explicitly what you wanted to see in layer 7 configurations? So WAF capability is not there today in VCD. On the AVI side, if you come, there are you will see a lot of stuff. So on the layer 7, I think if you want to just do a follow-up, the advanced settings which I mentioned, like policies, HTTP policies, what you can configure. Right? If you do a configure policies here, you can see the HTTP request. I can create some rules here saying that, hey, allow this / index path. I can do all those things. Like, let's suppose I can create a matching rule here. I can say allow only get method, right? All those things I can do. If it is only get, allow that, right? So I'll say get, action is allow, or if it is not get, basically deny, right? And actions, I can do a deny or redirect or modify header. I can do the actions, and I have pretty good matching methods. Either I can do it based on path, query, cookies, request headers, or client IPs. I can say this particular client IP rate limit this IP address, or block this set of IP addresses, whitelist, blacklist. You can do all those settings in this request policies, right? We have request and response both, so you can do it in the ingress or egress side of the things. And if you have a HTTPS VS, you can do the security side of the things, like what ciphers and all those things you want to block or allow, right? Hope that answers the question. Questions panel. Sharing. So Henrique, did that answer? Sorry if okay. How can tenants configure sites? Right now we don't have GSLB provided across in the VCD portal right now. Hopefully next year we'll have something there. Nicola, can we use an IP from the same subnet as real servers for the web? Yes, you can use. You can use the same IP from the. We are a one-arm load balancer, so you can use that. For inline also, but if you want to preserve the client IP, the VIP IP cannot be from the server pool. You have to use inline load balancing topology for doing that. Monir, another question. There is a limitation about the number of interfaces per service engine, which is they have multiple interfaces. Yes. So a service engine is effectively a VM in vCenter or vSphere context. So the max number of service interfaces any VM can have in vCenter is 10, and we take one interface for management. So effectively, you have 9 data NICs which are available for the service engines to use that. So effectively, 9 tier 1s is what one service engine can handle. Okay. What about CA certificate for the HTTPS? Yeah, Vivek, yes, we have that setting also. Let me quickly show again. I'm presenting again. Hopefully you are able to see. So I'll go back to virtual service, and when you do the virtual service add, right? And when I choose HTTP yes, it will ask you to select the certificate as well, and you need to kind of import those certificates to the vCD. Right now I have all the default ones. If there was a application certificate which you can which you have uploaded, it will have displayed here, and you can choose those certificates for your HTTP SVS virtual services which you are creating. Hope that answers that question. Let me see. There was one other question, I think initially, can we use NSX ALB as LBAS in vCD? No, you cannot use NSX ALB. It is getting deprecated, and we have made the announcement now deprecation. The only option what you have is NSX Advanced Load Balancer in vCD with underlying NSXT as the network infrastructure. So I think there was this other question that is I'm concerned by the service engine group management network to be is shared in shared context. I think the shared context we discussed a little bit in detail, that the VRF is different, the NIC will be different, even though the VM is shared. It's effectively like, as a provider, you are sharing underlying host. Now you are sharing the VM, right? In a shared mode, in a shared SE group. So if you don't want to share the VM, you can create a dedicated service engine group for those respective tenants. So I think we are on the top of the hour. And I don't see any new questions. Thanks a lot, everyone, for joining us. And please get in touch with our account teams or send a mail to us. We'll share the deck as well. And hope to kind of make you successful in the vCD deployments. Thank you, everyone.